All right, welcome students. In this explainer, we are going to absolutely master one of the most important topics for your board exams. We're going to break down the entire process of how flowering plants reproduce, making sure you've got all the key facts and diagrams you need to succeed. So, let's kick things off with a really big question to get our heads in the game. How does this happen? From a colorful petal to a tiny seed. It's a truly remarkable journey. And trust me, by the end of this, you'll be able to answer this question with total confidence. Here's our game plan. We'll start by looking at the structure. Then we'll follow the pollen's journey, see what happens when it meets the ovule, get into the main event, double fertilization, and then see how a flower turns into a fruit. And finally, we'll wrap up with how to ace this on your exam. Let's get started. Okay, let's dive right in. First things first, we need to understand the structure where all this amazing action happens. Because a flower isn't just pretty to look at, it's a highly specialized machine built for one thing: reproduction. Now, this is super important. It's absolutely essential that you can draw and label these parts, so pay close attention. We've got the sepals down at the base, those colorful petals, the stamen, that's the male part that makes the pollen, and right in the middle, we have the carpel, which is the female part that holds the future seeds. For your exam, you've got to know the difference between the parts that don't reproduce and the parts that do. Think of them as two groups. The non-reproductive parts are like the support crew. The sepals protect the young bud, and the petals are there to attract pollinators. But the real business happens with the reproductive parts. The stamen, which produces the male cells in the pollen, and the carpel, which contains the female cell inside the ovules. All right, so we know who the players are. Now let's get into the first big step of the journey, pollination. This is all about how the male gametes, which are just the plant's reproductive cells, actually get from the male part of a flower over to the female part. Listen up. This is one of those definitions you just have to know. It's simple, it's precise, and it's pretty much a guaranteed point on your exam. It's that critical first step. Without it, nothing else can happen. Now, pollination can happen in two main ways. On one hand, you have self-pollination. This is when a flower pollinates itself, like in a pea plant. On the other hand, you have cross-pollination, where pollen travels from one flower to a totally different one, usually with some help from wind or insects. And this is a big deal because it mixes up the genes, which creates stronger, more adaptable plants. And you know what's cool? This isn't some new idea. As this quote shows, even the great Charles Darwin noticed that plants just naturally seem to prefer cross-fertilization when they have the chance. He realized it gave them a huge advantage in the game of survival. Okay, so the pollen has landed. But believe it or not, its real adventure is just getting started. You see, getting to the stigma is only half the battle. Now it has to find its way to the egg cell, which is tucked away deep inside the ovary.
Now, this part here, pollen germination, this is a sequence-based question that examiners absolutely love. What happens is, the stigma releases this sugary fluid that feeds the pollen grain, and that makes it grow a tiny tube. This pollen tube is like a microscopic tunnel digging its way down through the style, carrying its very precious cargo.
Okay, let's zoom in even further. We're going to follow that pollen tube all the way down deep inside the ovary to its final destination, the ovule. This is where the female gamete, the egg cell, has been waiting.
Now, inside that ovule, you'll find something called the embryo sac, and it has this very specific, kind of weird structure. It's a key fact you'll see in multiple choice questions. It's made of 7 cells, but one of those cells actually has 2 nuclei, which we call the polar nuclei. So you get a total of 7 cells, but 8 nuclei. Remember that. All right, everybody, deep breath. We've arrived at the main event. This is the big one, a favorite for examiners, so pay close attention. It's called double fertilization, and it's the ingenious process that makes flowering plants so incredibly special. So here's the crazy part. 2 separate fertilizations are happening at pretty much the same time. The first male nucleus joins with the egg cell to create the zygote. That's the first cell that will grow into the baby plant, the embryo. At the same time, the second male nucleus fuses with those 2 polar nuclei to create the endosperm. And you can think of the endosperm as the packed lunch for the embryo. It's its food supply. This definition right here, it's often worth a solid 2 or 3 marks. So you're going to want to learn it precisely. It really highlights those 2 separate fusions that happen inside the embryo sac. And that's the whole key to this process. And really, this is what sets flowering plants, or angiosperms as they're officially called, apart from every other plant group out there. This whole process of creating both an embryo and its food supply at the exact same time is a super efficient and brilliant evolutionary trick. So once fertilization is done, the flower's job isn't over, not by a long shot. Its job of being pretty and attracting pollinators is finished, so now it puts all of its energy into developing the next generation. It's about to go through a massive transformation.
This slide is your perfect cheat sheet for what happens next. The ovule, which has the embryo inside, that becomes the seed. The ovary wall around it, that swells up and ripens into the fruit, which is there to protect the seed. It's a perfect system, right? The zygote grows into the embryo, and the endosperm is its food.
All right, let's bring it all home. We're going to do a quick, focused revision on exactly what you need to know to crush this on your exam. If you can master these key points, you'll be in fantastic shape. This is it, your final checklist. If you can confidently explain these 5 things, you are fully prepared. Seriously, practice drawing the diagrams, memorize those definitions, and make sure you can explain the whole process, step by step.
So here's the real test. Can you do it? Pause right here and try to explain the entire process from start to finish in your own words. Start with the anther, talk about pollination, the pollen tube, double fertilization, and finish with how the seed and fruit are formed. If you can do that, you've absolutely got this. Good luck.